My ex wants to meet our daughter, my wife said, casually setting her phone down on the kitchen counter. Sure, I said, not looking up from the dishes I was washing. 20 minutes later, her ex-boyfriend stood in our living room, and instead of extending his hand to greet me, he handed me a sealed DNA test kit. My wife grabbed it out of my hands before I could even read the label. My name is Trevor Hale. I'm 35, living in Richmond, Virginia, married to Simone for 7 years, father to our 6-year-old daughter, Adeline. That evening started ordinarily enough until Simone's ex, a man named Julius, showed up at our door with a request that would unravel 7 years of assumptions I'd never once questioned. Why would he ask to meet Adeline? I asked Simone after Julius arrived, watching Adeline play in the next room, oblivious to the tension building around her. He's been in therapy, Simone said, avoiding direct eye contact. Working through regrets about our relationship years ago. I think meeting her is part of some closure process. Julius, standing awkwardly near our fireplace, cleared his throat. That's not entirely accurate, Simone. Simone's face tightened. Julius, please. I can't keep pretending anymore, Julius said, turning toward me directly. Trevor, I need you to understand something before this goes any further. 6 years ago, right after Adeline was born, Simone reached out to me. She was struggling with severe doubts about paternity. Doubts she never resolved, doubts she's apparently still carrying. I felt the floor shift beneath me. What kind of doubts? Simone sat down heavily on our couch, burying her face in her hands. Julius and I broke up 8 months before Adeline was born, but there was a brief period, about 2 weeks, right before we ended things permanently, where the timing became complicated. Complicated how? I asked, my voice tighter than I intended. We slept together one final time. Simone admitted, tears forming immediately. Right before I met you, right before everything changed between us. I convinced myself the timing didn't align with Adeline's conception, but I've never been completely certain. And that uncertainty has haunted me every single day for 6 years. I stood frozen in our kitchen, dish towel still in my hand, processing information that recontextualized 6 years of marriage and fatherhood instantly. You've had doubts about whether I'm Adeline's biological father for 6 years, I said slowly. And you never once mentioned this to me? I was terrified, Simone said, voice breaking completely now. Terrified of destroying our family over uncertainty that might not even be true. I convinced myself silence was protecting us, protecting Adeline from complications that might never actually be relevant. Julius stepped forward slightly, the DNA test kit still sitting on our coffee table where Simone had placed it after grabbing it from my hands. I've carried similar uncertainty, Trevor, watching Adeline grow up from a distance, seeing photos Simone occasionally shared with mutual friends, wondering if I was watching my own daughter being raised by someone else without ever knowing the truth. I picked up the sealed test kit, staring at it, understanding now why Simone had grabbed it so quickly from my hands moments earlier. How long have you had this? I asked her directly. Julius brought it today, Simone said. He's been asking for months to finally resolve this uncertainty, and I kept refusing, terrified of whatever the results might reveal. Why did you finally agree to this conversation today? I asked. Julius answered instead. Because I'm getting married next spring, Trevor. My fiance wants children eventually, and I need to know, definitively, whether I already have a daughter I've never been allowed to properly know before starting a new family with someone else. The weight of that statement settled heavily across our living room. Adeline's laughter drifted in from the next room, completely unaware that her entire understanding of family might be about to shift permanently. I need time to process this, I said, setting the test kit down carefully. This isn't something I can just immediately decide about. I understand, Julia said. I'm not trying to force anything. I just need to know the truth for my own peace of mind moving forward, regardless of what that truth ultimately means for any of our relationships with Adeline. Julius left shortly after, leaving Simone and me alone with 7 years of marriage suddenly feeling foundation shaken by 6 years of unspoken uncertainty. I need you to explain why you never told me any of this, I said, sitting across from Simone at our kitchen table once Adeline had been settled with a movie in the other room. Because every time I imagine telling you, Simone said, I imagined losing everything. Losing you, losing our family, losing the only version of motherhood I'd ever actually experienced with Adeline. I convinced myself that if I never took the test, the uncertainty would somehow protect all three of us from a truth that might destroy everything we'd built together. That's not protection, Simone, I said, exhaustion evident in my voice despite trying to remain calm for Adeline's sake in the next room. That's 6 years of me raising a child without knowing whether foundational information about her identity was being deliberately withheld from me. I know, she said, tears falling freely now. I've hated myself for this secret every single day, watching you be the most devoted father imaginable, wondering if that devotion was built on a foundation I'd never had the courage to properly examine. We sat in heavy silence for a long time, the sealed DNA test sitting between us on the table, representing either continued uncertainty or answers that might permanently alter our family's entire trajectory. What do you want to do? Simone finally asked. I thought carefully before answering. I need to take that test. Not because it changes how much I love Adeline, because it doesn't, regardless of what it reveals, but because I deserve to know the truth about my own daughter's biological origins, and because you've apparently been carrying this uncertainty alone for 6 years in a way that's clearly been damaging you internally. We completed the DNA test that evening. Adeline's cheek swab collected under the guise of a simple game before bedtime. Samples from both Julius and myself submitted alongside hers to a laboratory that promised results within 1 week. That week felt like the longest of my entire life. Simone and I existing in strange, careful tension, both of us trying to maintain normalcy for Adeline's sake while privately consumed by anxiety about results that would fundamentally reshape our family story either way. I found myself watching Adeline differently during that week, not with any less love, but with heightened awareness of features I'd never previously scrutinized so carefully. Her eyes, technically brown like both Simone and myself, her curly hair texture, which I'd always assumed came from my mother's side of the family, small details I'd taken for granted as obviously mine suddenly feeling uncertain and precarious. Julius called twice that week, checking in anxiously, clearly experiencing his own version of agonizing uncertainty about results that would determine whether he'd missed 6 years of his own daughter's life or whether his doubts had been misplaced entirely. The results arrived exactly 7 days later, delivered via secure email that I opened alone in our bedroom while Simone waited anxiously downstairs, unable to be present when the actual results appeared on screen. I stared at the document for a long moment before fully processing what I was reading. Trevor Hale, 99.99% probability of paternity. I sat there in stunned silence, relief flooding through me so intensely I felt physically lightheaded. 7 days of carefully controlled anxiety finally releasing completely. I walked downstairs slowly, finding Simone sitting rigidly on our couch, unable to look up as I approached. I'm her father, I said simply, voice thick with emotion. Biologically, completely, without any ambiguity whatsoever. Simone broke down completely, 6 years of carried guilt and uncertainty finally releasing in genuine, overwhelming relief. I'm so sorry, she said through tears. I'm so sorry I carried this alone for so long. So sorry I let uncertainty poison something that turns out to have been solid and true this entire time. I called Julius immediately afterward, delivering results that clearly devastated him despite his earlier claims of simply wanting truth regardless of outcome. I need time, Julius said quietly before ending the call, his voice heavy with disappointment, despite years of uncertainty finally being resolved definitively. Over the following months, Simone and I worked intensively with a marriage counselor, addressing not just this specific secret, but the deeper pattern of fear and self-protective silence that had allowed 6 years of significant uncertainty to remain hidden within our marriage. I need to understand why silence felt safer than honesty, Simone said during one particularly difficult session, even when that silence meant carrying enormous guilt alone rather than trusting you enough to face uncertainty together. Through months of therapy, we uncovered patterns rooted in Simone's own childhood. Growing up with parents whose marriage had been genuinely destroyed by an infidelity revelation when she was 12, teaching her early that secrets, once revealed, inevitably led to complete family destruction rather than potential resolution or healing. "I spent 6 years protecting you from information," she told me eventually, using the same flawed logic my own mother used when she discovered my father's affair and chose divorce immediately rather than attempting any form of reconciliation or understanding. Understanding this origin didn't excuse 6 years of withheld truth, but it helped both of us process what had happened with more compassion than pure anger would have allowed, recognizing generational patterns rather than simply assigning blame without deeper understanding. Julius, after several months of processing his own disappointment, eventually reached out again, not to challenge the DNA results, but to apologize for the disruption his uncertainty had caused within our family. Having finally found peace with information that, while personally difficult, had at least provided him definitive closure rather than continued ambiguity. "I think some part of me wanted it to be true," he admitted during that conversation. "Wanted a connection to a life I'd watched from a distance for years. But watching how solid your family actually is, watching how completely Adeline is yours and Simone's together, helps me understand that sometimes closure means accepting truth rather than continuing to wish for alternative realities." Adeline, now approaching 7 years old, remains completely unaware of the crisis that briefly threatened her family's foundation during that intense week of uncertainty. Simone and I made a deliberate choice not to burden her with adult complications. She was far too young to properly process or understand. Our marriage, while permanently changed by that revelation, ultimately grew stronger through the difficult work of addressing exactly why such significant uncertainty had remained hidden for 6 years. We developed genuinely improved communication patterns, actively working against the instinct toward protective silence that had nearly cost us complete transparency within our own family. I think often about that DNA test result, about how close our family came to potentially fracturing over uncertainty that Simone had carried alone for 6 years, believing silence somehow protected all three of us more effectively than vulnerable honesty ever could have. If you've ever carried significant uncertainty or fear within your own relationship, convinced that silence protects the people you love more than honesty would, I hope this story reminds you of something important. The weight of hidden truth almost always causes more damage than the vulnerability of facing uncertainty together honestly. Real partnership requires trusting the people we love enough to face difficult truths as a team, rather than carrying protective secrets alone that ultimately create far more distance and potential damage than honest vulnerability ever could. Sometimes the truths we're most terrified to face turn out to solidify exactly the foundations we were afraid they might destroy. But we only discover that solid ground by finally having the courage to seek truth together, rather than remaining paralyzed by protective uncertainty indefinitely. If you enjoyed this story, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more real, emotional stories like this one every week. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.